request for an interesting or humorous behind-the-scenes anecdote involving the stars.
There were none. God. I mean, the actors were extraordinary. The production was savage. It was just an incredibly hard production to get made, and very little money, hugely ambitious, extremely long days, and so many locations squeezed into. You know, in Montreal we had to find, and it's a city that could actually provide it, backdrops for London of 1966. You know, New York of 1962 through 4, rural America of the antique past, you know, so many distinct and varied backdrops and tons of tiny things in between. So it was a logistical nightmare and challenge for everybody involved. But yeah, each actor took it on like they were the lead of the film, not in ego or anything, but in total commitment to their relatively smaller roles.
The observation was that this seemed to be an even more complex version of Todd Haynes' earlier film, Poison, and the question was, how did you determine the way in which you put these various strands together?
They function, they kind of are introduced still in a linear framework, you know, through starting with the younger stories and ending with the oldest Dylan character. And the script did interweave them, and in some ways follow some of those specific points of intersection, but that did evolve absolutely in the process of cutting the film. And I wanted it both to feel like you are moving forward, there's a through line here, but that I also wanted to encourage the dialogue, I guess, between the different strands of a life, you know, the way our lives can contradict, you know, phases in our life can completely contradict and almost come into being in opposition to another phase of our life, you know, and how that always goes on with people, really, you know, if you're allowing yourself to change at some point, you know, and make changes. And so, and what I hoped, and it you know, may or may not work for everybody, is that, and the only way I thought this film could work is that one story is kind of filling in the other, that there's a way in which you feel like you're living through the whole thing, but that one story, when you're away from another story, something is being learned in the story you're in that gives some sort of secondary knowledge or feeling like you lived through something, and that, you know, that they all are coexisting, I guess. And that's why, in a way, the Billy story, the rest of the Western, parallels a lot with the Richard Gere, the Heath Ledger, Charlotte Gainsbourg story toward the last third of the film. Almost to feel like this lost, this broken marriage, this failed relationship is something in the past of the Richard Gere story himself, and his isolation and his exile has some kind of instinctive, relationship to those earlier life failures.
So this is something that you really developed in the process of editing the film.
Yes and no. Like that was scripted. The Richard Gere, Heath Ledger kind of back and forth. Even those little lines that link them when Richard's starting to go down the hill and go get into his town, and you see Heath coming home from the trip that he's been on, making the movie, and he lands at home, but they're both alone, and you know, those little linked stories were completely out of the script. So there weren't a lot of radical reshiftings that went on.
The question is, how did you decide that from the beginning to have the Jude character played by a woman?
Yeah, I sort of skipped over that kernel there. And yet I kind of touched on it in that the unique weirdness of Dylan at that time, I feel, has gotten to be so normal, it's so canonized. We know those images of Dylan so well. But he was bizarre. I mean, the way he would play piano in concert, which Kate sort of mimics in the film, and you see it in the Scorsese documentary where his hand just sort of flies up between every line, and he would jump around the stage like a little kind of, kind of speedy marionette figure or something. And the way he spoke, his gestures, everything about him from that one time is not evident in Don't Look Back from a year earlier, and would never return again after his motorcycle crash at the end of '66. It was such a complete immersion in this moment, and it was androgynous. It was a different kind of androgyny than we would see later with people like Bowie and artists like that. It was almost more like channeling Patti Smith of a decade later, But it was unmanly, unmacho, for all of the kind of ways that Dylan is often associated as a guy's artist or a heterosexual kind of icon or something. His flamboyance and foppery during that time is really profound, and it must have been a freaker for people at the time, and that's something you always want to try as a director, to re-excite the shock of Chopin in his moment, the craziness of, famous people at their famous moments. All the blood and guts has gone away a long time after they become famous, and that's like a great challenge for somebody to try to stir up.
The question was whether at one point the film emphasized or went deeper into the African-American influence on Dylan's art, I guess, and or the Jewish component of his identity.
I can't imagine getting deeper into his African-American influence than turning him black.
Absolutely true. But the music that Woody plays owes more to Woody Guthrie than Blind Willie McTell.
Yes. But both that song is in the film, obviously, and is how we end the story of. I mean, what was so fascinating about Dylan is the way he so skirted who he quote unquote really was for things that he really wanted to be, and how the wannabe kept changing, faces. And so he wanted to be Woody Guthrie, and he wanted to not be Jewish, and he wanted to be Arthur Rimbaud at some point, and he wanted to be, Billy the Kid. And so I let him be all those things, basically. But you're right, there's no possible way. So a lot of the film and a lot of the jokes of the film are about trading one authenticity for another, or one fakery for another. And so Kate's the character who gets revealed as the Jewish Dylan. But that is, I have to say, one aspect of Dylan's life that is maybe the most secret and the most well-preserved. Of course, we can all hear those stories of him being at the Wailing Wall and all that, and finally exploring Judaism in a way he may have explored Christianity, but in a much more private way. But I still couldn't tell you where, and I've read all the biographies, and I still really don't know what his relationship is to Judaism. And I think it's kept very close to his family life, which is the thing he's most successfully protected his whole life. But yeah, it's not all in there. It's not all there.
There's also